Imagine marching 15 miles uphill in pitch darkness. You're navigating these treacherous ravines, and then you just stumble right into an army of 5 combined kings at the first light of dawn.
Yeah, that is not exactly a gentle morning walk.
Definitely not. Well, welcome to the deep dive, and may God bless your day and your week as you join us. I am thrilled you're here because today we're embarking on an exploration into a text that is it's packed with desperate military strategy.
Oh, and brutal ancient politics. Plus, some of the most fiercely debated ancient mysteries you can find anywhere.
Exactly. We are diving deep into chapter 10 of the book of Joshua, and to guide this deep dive, we're pulling from a really rich stack of sources, specifically the detailed scholarly notes found in the Holman and NWA study Bibles.
And it's a chapter that, well, it demands you read it with a very specific ancient set of lenses. You really can't just skim the surface here.
Right, and the mission for this deep dive is to reconstruct that ancient perspective. We're setting the stage for a story that genuinely has it all.
It really does. I mean, we're talking geopolitical panic, secret night marches.
Cosmic level anomalies in the sky.
Yeah, and intensely visceral symbols of absolute victory. The goal here isn't just to memorize the sequence of a military campaign.
No, we want to uncover how the ancient historians who recorded this event used the narrative itself to convey this massive, undeniable message of divine intervention.
Right, because when you're analyzing ancient texts like this, it's so crucial to remember the authors weren't operating like modern news reporters reciting dry statistics.
They weren't just writing a textbook.
Exactly. They were weaving theology, tactical history, and profound cultural symbolism into just a single cohesive tapestry. And to understand the climax, you have to understand the geography and the politics that started it.
So let's look at the trigger, right?
Yep.
Like, why is there a sudden explosive conflict in the hill country of Canaan to begin with?
Well, it all begins with a colossal shift in the balance of power. The geopolitical landscape at this exact moment is incredibly tense.
Because the Israelite forces, led by Joshua, have recently annihilated Jericho and Ai.
Right. And that level of destruction is enough to send a shockwave through the region.
Yeah.
But the spark that actually ignites this five-king coalition in Chapter 10 is an unexpected political defection.
Which brings us to a ruler named Adoni-Zedek, the king of Jerusalem.
Yeah, and the sources point out the irony in his name, which translates to, "My Lord is righteous."
Right, because despite projecting that confident title, the text makes it really clear he is just terrified.
Oh, he's in full panic mode. And it isn't primarily about Jericho falling, actually. He's terrified because of Gibeon.
And Gibeon wasn't just some vulnerable little farming village, right?
Not at all. The study notes emphasize that it was a royal city. It was significantly larger than Ai and renowned for being filled with mighty warriors. It was a massive military powerhouse.
But instead of marshaling its army to fight Joshua, Gibeon strikes a peace treaty with Israel.
Yeah, and think about the strategic fallout of a move like that in the ancient world.
It's kind of like it's the equivalent of a massive corporate buyout that upends an entire industry overnight.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Or like a heavy-hitting swing state suddenly flipping its allegiance a week before the election. The infrastructure and the momentum completely change hands.
That corporate buyout analogy works perfectly, really, because Gibeon's defection wasn't merely a psychological blow. It was a geographical nightmare for Jerusalem.
Because Gibeon was immediately to the north. Right.
Exactly. It dominated the Central Plateau and held the keys to vital trade routes, especially the descent into the Western Plains.
So by handing those keys over to Israel, Gibeon basically leaves Jerusalem entirely exposed on its northern flank.
Right. And Adoni-Zedek calculates that he just cannot let this stand. Allowing Gibeon to flip unpunished sets a fatal precedent for other city-states.
It puts a massive enemy stronghold practically on his doorstep.
So his solution is immediate military retaliation. He sends urgent word to 4 other Amorite kings in the region, the kings of Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon.
So they pool their armies, march on Gibeon, and lay siege to it.
Which forces Gibeon to cash in their newly minted treaty. They send this frantic plea to Joshua, who's stationed down in the Jordan Valley at Gilgal, just begging him to come save them.
And Joshua's tactical response is staggering. I mean, the text notes that God provides Joshua with absolute reassurance.
Yeah, God says, "Do not be afraid of them, because I have handed them over to you."
And armed with that divine mandate, Joshua doesn't just assemble a marching column for a multi-day journey. He executes an immediate surprise attack, force-marching his entire army through the night.
And we really have to pause and appreciate the logistics of that march because they are grueling.
The study notes point out that moving from the encampment at Gilgal up to Gibeon is roughly a 24-kilometer trek, so about 15 miles.
And this is where geography dictates the reality of ancient warfare. Gilgal is down near the Jordan River, which is below sea level, but Gibeon is up in the central highlands.
So the elevation gain is thousands of feet.
Thousands of feet. They are ascending rugged, unpaved, treacherous mountain terrain in total darkness.
Oh, wow.
The physical exhaustion on a Bronze Age army carrying weapons and supplies up that incline would have been immense.
But the strategic payoff for absorbing that physical toll is total surprise, right? Because they crest the highlands and hit the Amorite coalition completely unawares at dawn.
Exactly. The shock of an entire army just appearing out of the night shatters the coalition's lines. They panic and break into this chaotic retreat.
And this tactical route leads directly into arguably the most famous and definitely the most debated sequences in the entire book of Joshua.
Yes, because the retreat funnels the Amorite armies down a very specific geographical bottleneck known as the Beth Horon Pass.
And as they're fleeing down the steep mountain pass toward places called Azekah and Makeda, the narrative introduces just an incredible detail.
Right, the hailstones.
Yeah, the text states that God hurls massive hailstones down from the sky onto the retreating armies. And the author goes out of their way to explicitly note that more enemy soldiers died from the hailstones than from the swords of the Israelites.
Which is huge. By heavily emphasizing the lethal effectiveness of the hailstones over the Israelite weapons, the ancient writer is laying down a definitive theological claim.
That God is the primary warrior here.
Exactly. He is weaponizing the natural world, the very elements of creation, to fight on behalf of his people. The text intentionally minimizes human military achievement to maximize the scale of divine intervention.
I mean, I have to push back a bit on the logic of the narrative here, though.
Okay, sure.
We just established that the hailstones were a natural weather event, right? Albeit a miraculously timed one. But in the very next breath, the text completely shatters the laws of astrophysics.
Ah, the sun standing still.
Right. Joshua speaks to God and then famously commands the sun to stand still over Gibeon and the moon to halt over the valley of Ajalon.
It's one of the most famous passages in the Bible.
The text literally says the sun stopped in the middle of the sky and delayed going down for about a full day. Like, why would the text shift from a plausible natural miracle like a hailstorm to a cosmically impossible event like halting the rotation of the Earth? How do modern scholars process that leap?
Well, that tension is exactly why this passage has generated so much debate for centuries. It really forces us to confront how we interpret ancient literary genres.
Okay, so what do the sources say?
The NAA Study Bible Notes offer a fantastic, nuanced breakdown of 4 distinct scholarly perspectives on how to understand the mechanics of this miracle.
Let's walk through those then, starting with, I guess, the most straightforward reading.
Sure. The first perspective is the traditional literal interpretation. This view maintains that it was a miracle of massive cosmic proportions.
So the Earth literally stopped rotating.
Right. It stopped on its axis for an extended period, freezing the sun's position in the sky to artificially prolong the daylight.
Which, if we apply modern physics, would rip the tectonic plates apart and vaporize the oceans due to the sudden loss of angular momentum.
Oh, completely. But from a purely theological standpoint, a deity with the power to speak the universe into existence could presumably manage the physics of pausing it.
Fair point. So for those readers, the physics don't matter.
Exactly. The omnipotence of God is the focal point there. However, the second interpretation views the entire passage through the lens of poetic imagery.
Oh, because of the Book of Jashar, right. The notes mention that. What exactly was the Book of Jashar?
Well, most scholars believe it was a well-known ancient anthology of heroic poetry that celebrated the great victories of Israel. And when Joshua speaks to the sun and moon here, he actually does so in poetic meter.
So if it's poetry, the language of the sun and moon standing still on opposite horizons might just be a vivid, hyperbolic way of describing an astronomically significant day.
Exactly. A poet writing about a momentous victory might say, the day seemed to last forever, without meaning the Earth literally stopped spinning.
Or they might be describing like a solar eclipse, where the celestial bodies appear to converge. The poetic interpretation treats it as a literary device.
Right, to express the sheer magnitude of the victory.
Okay, so if we move away from both the literal cosmic pause and the purely poetic view, is there a middle ground, like a physical event that we might just be misunderstanding due to translation?
There is. And that leads directly to the third interpretation, which is fascinating because it hinges on the nuances of biblical Hebrew.
Okay, how so?
This view shifts the focus from extending light to providing physical relief. The Hebrew word translated as stand still, it's damam, can also be translated as to be silent, to cease, or to be still.
Wait, how does the sun being silent help an army?
Well, remember that brutal 24-kilometer night march up into the mountains? Those Israelite soldiers had been marching all night and fighting all morning. They had to be running on fumes.
Oh, so they were exhausted.
Right. This theory posits that Joshua wasn't asking for more daylight at all. He was asking for relief from the scorching midday sun. In this scenario, God answers by bringing in an unnatural, heavy cloud cover.
Oh, wow, which actually perfectly aligns with the massive hailstorm that was just dropping boulders of ice on the Amory.
Exactly. It connects the two events seamlessly. The dark storm clouds block the intense heat of the sun, effectively silencing its oppressive heat.
That makes a lot of sense. It prevents the Israelites from collapsing of heat exhaustion, allowing them to maintain the pursuit. That is a brilliant mechanical explanation.
It's very grounded.
So what is the fourth perspective from the NWA notes?
The fourth view suggests a miraculous refraction of light. In this scenario, the Earth's rotation remains constant, but the atmospheric conditions are miraculously altered.
So maybe by those same storm clouds or ice crystals from the hail?
Exactly. The atmosphere is altered to bend the sunlight over the horizon. This would artificially extend the twilight, giving the Israelites the visibility they desperately needed to finish the pursuit before darkness allowed the enemy to scatter.
Okay, so four vastly different mechanical explanations for the exact same verses. We have a cosmic pause, ancient epic poetry, heat-blocking storm clouds, and atmospheric light refraction.
Yeah, and while they differ wildly on the how, the NWA notes synthesize a crucial point about the why.
Right.
Regardless of which physical mechanic you find most compelling, the ultimate focus of the author is theological, not scientific.
The writer isn't trying to publish a paper on orbital mechanics.
Not at all. They're recording an extraordinary, unprecedented response to a man's prayer. The text explicitly states, "There's been no day like it before or since when the Lord heeded the voice of a man."
So the overarching message is to prove, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that God was actively fighting for Israel. Well, with the daylight, or the relief from the heat provided, the battle is decisively won. And then the narrative suddenly shifts gears again. We transition from these soaring cosmic miracles right back down to the grim, visceral reality of ancient battlefield tactics.
Right, because the coalition army is decimated, but the 5 kings who started the war managed to escape.
Yeah, they flee the battlefield and are discovered hiding deep inside a cave at Makeda. And when word reaches Joshua, his response is ruthlessly pragmatic.
Very much so.
He doesn't halt the momentum of the pursuit to hold a tribunal. He orders his men to roll massive stones in front of the cave's mouth, trapping the kings inside, and he posts a guard. Why turn the cave into a temporary prison instead of just dealing with them right then and there?
It's a highly calculated strategic choice. The primary objective is to prevent the remaining Amorite soldiers from retreating behind the walls of their fortified cities.
Because if the enemy regroups inside their strongholds, this swift victory devolves into a series of long, drawn-out sieges.
Exactly, and sieges are incredibly costly. By sealing the kings away, Joshua ensures his main army can relentlessly chase down the fleeing survivors while the enemy leadership remains totally neutralized.
So they finish the mop-up operation, securing the region, and then Joshua returns to the cave at Makeda. And I want to spend some time on the scene that follows because it is deeply jarring to modern sensibilities.
It really is.
Joshua orders the stones rolled away and brings the 5 kings out. He then summons his military captains and commands them to step forward and literally place their feet on the necks of these defeated kings before they're executed.
Right.
To us, this feels unnecessarily brutal, almost theatrical. Why demand this intensely physical act?
I mean, it feels shocking to a modern reader, but we have to interpret this through the cultural and iconographic lens of the ancient Near East. In that specific world, placing your foot on the neck of a defeated enemy wasn't just an act of random cruelty.
What was it?
It was a universally recognized, highly formalized symbol.
So like a physical manifestation of political reality.
Yes. It was the ultimate, unmistakable symbol of total subjugation and absolute victory. We find this imagery carved into ancient Egyptian and Mesopotamian reliefs all over the ancient world.
Victorious pharaohs and kings depicted with their feet resting on the necks of their captives, right?
Exactly. The motif even appears later in biblical poetry, like Psalm 110, which talks about making enemies a footstool.
So Joshua is utilizing a cultural shorthand that everyone present, both the Israelites and the Amorites, would instantly understand.
Furthermore, he's using it as a psychological tool for his own leadership. Remember, these 5 kings were terrifying warlords who had just triggered a massive regional conflict.
Right.
By forcing his captains to physically step on their necks, Joshua is transferring his own authority and confidence to his officers. He tells them in that very moment, "Do not be afraid or dismayed. Be strong and courageous, for thus the Lord will do to all your enemies."
Wow, so he's visually demonstrating that the power structures that oppress them are now completely broken. And following this symbolic transfer of power, the kings are struck down. The text notes they are hung on trees until evening, which is another ancient mark of accursed defeat. And then, in a dark twist of poetic justice, they are thrown right back into the cave they tried to hide in.
And the stones are rolled back over the entrance. The cave that was meant to be their sanctuary becomes their permanent tomb.
And a lasting monument to the Israelite victory. So this decisive victory sets the stage for the remainder of chapter 10, which the sources summarize as the Southern Campaign.
Right.
Joshua's forces move rapidly, capturing a succession of major cities: Libnah, Lachish, Eglon, Hebron, Debir. But as you read through the historical account of this campaign, you collide with a theological concept that is, frankly, incredibly difficult for modern readers to process.
You're referring to the concept of Karam.
Yes, the Holman study notes heavily highlight this Hebrew word kanalim. It translates roughly to the holy ban, or things devoted to destruction. As the campaign progresses, the text repeatedly uses phrases like, "he left no survivors," and "he utterly destroyed all that breathed."
It's a very intense language.
When we read language that implies total annihilation like that, how do we reconcile it with historical reality?
This is perhaps the most critical nuance to grasp when reading ancient conquest narratives. And the NAA study notes provide essential context that completely reframes those passages.
Okay, I'm listening.
When the text claims they left no survivors or destroyed everything that breathed, it is utilizing highly stylized, hyperbolic rhetoric.
Meaning we shouldn't read it as a literal demographic genocide.
Absolutely not. And the broader biblical text itself actually provides the proof for that. In the ancient Near East, using absolute hyperbolic language was the standard culturally accepted way to record a triumphant military campaign.
So it's just an ancient genre of war reporting?
Exactly. It functions almost like modern psychological deterrence.
Oh, like if a modern sports fan says, "We absolutely slaughtered them on the field today. We left no survivors."
Right.
We know they didn't commit a crime, right? They're just describing a blowout victory.
Perfect analogy. In the ancient world, kings used this kind of massive exaggeration in their official records as a form of propaganda to project absolute strength to neighboring empires.
So the goal of the language was to denote a complete, decisive military victory where the enemy's political and military power structures were entirely dismantled.
Exactly. The narrative is emphasizing Joshua's total obedience to God and the thoroughness of the triumph, not an exhaustive headcount of casualties.
Right.
We know for a fact it wasn't a literal extermination of every breathing person, because if you continue reading into the later chapters of Joshua and turn the page into the book of Judges, you find those very same groups of people, the Amorites and the Canaanites, still living in large numbers in those exact regions.
Right, so the hyperbole communicates the theological truth of the victory, even if it ignores the literal demographics on the ground.
Exactly.
It's amazing. This entire deep dive forces you to constantly adjust your lenses between the tactical reality and the theological message.
It requires holding both in tension.
So, to summarize this immense chapter, we began with a geopolitical earthquake when the royal city of Gibeon defected. That triggered a grueling 15-mile night march up into the highlands by Joshua's forces, resulting in just a masterpiece of tactical surprise.
Right.
The narrative then weaves that gritty military history together with soaring cosmic theological claims, hailstones serving as divine artillery, and the sun and moon either pausing, hiding, or bending their light to ensure victory.
And all of this culminates in the visceral, symbolic reality of the cave at Makeda and the ancient hyperbolic rhetoric of total conquest.
It really is an entire chapter meticulously constructed to show a deity intimately and actively fighting for the survival of a people.
It is a profound piece of literature, and evaluating it leaves us with something fascinating to mull over, I think.
Oh, what's that?
Well, consider how fundamentally different our modern approach to recording history is compared to the ancients. Today, we are obsessed with clinical data. We desperately try to separate the physical, verifiable facts from anything spiritual, metaphorical, or interpretive.
Oh, absolutely. We want the exact mechanics of the weather anomaly and the precise casualty numbers.
But for the ancient writers compiling the book of Joshua, the spiritual reality, the undeniable belief that God was fighting for them, was the truest part of the history. The literal physics of how the sun acted, or the exact demographic data of the Canaanite survivors, those mattered far less than the theological reality of divine intervention.
That's a great point.
It makes you wonder, when readers 3,000 years from now look back at our purely factual, data-driven historical records, will they think we missed the deeper meaning of our own stories?
The facts versus the deeper reality. That is a brilliant and provocative thought to leave on. Thank you so much for joining us as we unpack the layers of this incredible ancient text. We hope this deep dive gave you some new perspectives to chew on and helped bridge the gap between the ancient world and our own. As always, thank you for listening, and God blesses all the listeners as you go about the rest of your week. Until next time.